Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. I was just chatting with our guest this afternoon, Taylor Griffin, who is a candidate seeking the Republican nomination for a 3rd Congressional District. And I just asked him casually off air, I said, you do have a Democrat opponent out there. I mean, you've got Democrats that are running, I say opponent, that are running for the office as well. And he did remember that David Hurst is running, and we had to look it up. The other one is Ernest Reeves. These are two candidates that, well, stealth is a good term. Don't hear much about them. But Taylor, good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Good afternoon, Lockwood. It's great to be here.
Let's talk about the campaign right out of the gate. This is an extended campaign instead of the earlier, well, actually, an advanced vote, because originally the campaign was going to, the state primary was going to be conducted in May. Then, of course, it got moved back because of the early primaries in March. And then, of course, the congressional primary, because of the issue of redistricting, got extended to June. So you go from May to March to June. That's got to be difficult on the planning schedule for a race that, I mean, you had to file in December, as I recall.
Yeah. Third time's the charm.
Okay. We will have an election this time around.
Third election date we've had, and that's why it's really important. And I'm so glad you had me on to remind people that if you voted in the March 15th race, if you voted for me, you got to do it again June 7th. If you didn't vote for me, you got another chance.
That's right.
It's great news.
And that's a good point. You know, we're kind of thinking that the presidential primaries are over, local primaries are over, state primaries are over. We can sit back. We don't have to wait until, we don't have to worry until November. But to your point, we've got a primary coming. I mean, another primary. It's not even a runoff. It's the primary for congressional seats in North Carolina. And by the way, this is now a winner-take-all situation. In other words, historically, you had to have 40% or more of the plurality, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Okay. I'm looking at you as the teacher in this regard. So this is important. The turnout decides.
That's exactly right. And, you know, Lockwood, we got well over 40% of the vote last time. And
let me interrupt and just make one other comment, because not to demean the Democrat candidates, but in reality, this election represents, for all intents and purposes, who will represent the 3rd District in Washington, D.C.
That's exactly right. The 3rd District is overwhelmingly Republican. So whoever wins the Republican primary, hopefully me, will be the congressman for the next 2 years.
And on top of that, because both David Hurst, which I'm confident many people are hearing the name for the first time, Ernest Reeves, also the first time they've heard that name, neither of them have shown any interest in really seeking votes, Republican or Democrat. I mean, they just haven't been present.
Yeah, and I think it's a recognition of the fact that Eastern North Carolina is very conservative. It's one of the reasons that I'm running, because I think that I represent a more effective and more consistently conservative candidate for this seat, and will represent Eastern North Carolina in that way.
You said a few moments ago, your polling indications are pretty positive for you?
Yeah, if people know something about the race, we do very, very well. And I think that we have, this is my second time running, as you know, Lockwood, and you and I have spent a lot of time together over the years.
Right.
Don't hold that against me, listeners.
Well, yeah, don't ruin that. I don't know whose reputation is being ruined on that one, but go ahead. Yeah. Right.
So this is the second go at it, and what we saw last time is that people were ready for a change in this congressional seat. We came within 2,000 votes of winning. We won Carteret County by 10%, by double digits. We won this county by double digits, and I'm so grateful for the support of people here. This is a place that's very special to me. It's where, I grew up in Wilson, and as most people, as you probably know, most people from Wilson spend their summers at the beach here in Moorhead, and so this is where I spent all my summers growing up. And I think we need two things. We need change. Career politics is not working for this country. It's not working for Eastern North Carolina. We need serious conservatives to address the serious problems this country is facing, people who are principled. I worked for Senator Jesse Helms, and I learned from the best, in my view, of how to be effective for the people and how to be principled in your beliefs. And I plan to carry that to Congress.
Let's talk first and foremost about your opinions of the big issues in Washington, D.C., and then those issues and how and when could they be either solved or in some way ameliorated. softened in some fashion. So what are the big issues, in your opinion, in your platform?
Well, the biggest issue for us nationally, and I'd like to also talk about some of the local issues too, but is the national debt.
Okay.
I want to tell you a stunning statistic, Lockwood. The Congressional Budget Office now estimates that within 5 years, 2021, just the interest alone on our national debt will cost us $600 billion a year. It's about $250 billion now. That is more than we spent last year on our entire national defense. So we've got some really tough choices to make, and that's going to require, frankly, kicking everyone in Congress out and putting in a new generation who's willing to make those tough choices. And the second thing is that we've seen there's so many veterans here in Eastern North Carolina. There's 70,000 veterans in the 3rd Congressional District. The VA is a complete disaster, and we have a major task in front of us to fundamentally reform the VA so that we serve those people who served our country and with health care that they deserve.
Let's look at that national debt. And by the way, that topic came up last evening as well, as you know. And I was talking to our teenagers following that interview last evening with Congressman Jones and Jordan, and Congressman Jordan, of course, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, the Freedom Caucus. I get them confused with Liberty. But we talked about the national debt, and I then talked to the high schoolers about that. And not to demean the high schoolers, and quite frankly, I would argue even the adults in the majority of our listening audience really don't have a feeling, big zeros, lots of zeros, 12 or 14, I've got to go back and count, zeros behind the national debt. There's a sense out there that people really don't feel the urgency on that national debt. And I'm wondering if Congress feels the urgency on that national debt.
It does not, Lockwood, and that's the problem. Because every incentive is to kick the can down the field.
Right.
Because it's those high schoolers, those millennials, who are going to be paying the price for the profligate spending in Washington. And, I spent some time in Washington. I worked for Senator Helms, great conservative, who worked to get smaller government and fiscal responsibility. And to where we are now, where in this issue on the debt, there's not a dime's worth of difference between a lot of Republicans and Democrats, honestly. And as I watched what happened, first it was that, okay, well, we've been attacked on 9/11, so we got to spend a little more. It's okay to have a debt. We'll kick the can down the field. All right, fine. We'll get the conservative reforms in place afterwards. And it was like we got to build an enduring Republican coalition. To do that, we got to reach out to Democrats, and we got to have bigger government and give them the programs they want. We'll kick the can down the field a little more. The financial crisis came, and we're going to bail out the banks, and we're going to bail out the and we're going to do this huge stimulus program. We'll kick the can down the field a little more. In the meantime, we took the debt and almost tripled it. And it's got to stop, or the country cannot continue to exist into the future.
All right. And by the way, I did come back and check. I was right. It's 12 zeros. That's $1 trillion.
Yeah.
12 zeros. All right. Again, our guest this afternoon, Taylor Griffin, candidate, 3rd Congressional District, U.S. House, Republican, seeking the Republican nomination. National debt, number one issue. Let's talk about local issues, in your opinion. You mentioned VA. I would assume that's part of the local issues. What else?
Yeah, well, I think, staying on the military theme, we've got Cherry Point right down the road.
Right.
And I don't know if a lot of people realize this. Cherry Point is extremely important to the mission of the Marine Corps, and it's going to be extremely important in the future, but it's heavily dependent on the transition to the F-35.
Right.
We have a lot of investments to make from the federal level in upgrades to Cherry Point in order to provide for the transition of the F-35, because all of the aircraft that are currently being, or most of the fixed-wing aviation assets that are operating out of Cherry Point are being phased out over the next few years. The Harriers are 20, 30 more years old. The E-6Bs, the electronic warfare planes, they're being phased out in 2019 to be replaced by the F-35, which won't come in until the early 2020s or something. That has got to be a major focus. Now, we talked about the debt. I think that the Constitution makes it very clear what the priorities of the federal government is. Our national defense and our veterans are number one priority, and that's worth spending money on. We need to cut elsewhere. So we have to make those investments so that our military and our Marines can do the mission that policymakers ask them to do. And then, you get into fisheries issues. I mean, I've spent a lot of time at meetings of the Finfish Advisory Council for the North Carolina Marine Fisheries about the cobia season closure. The federal government is trying to make us close our cobia season early in federal waters for a species that isn't even threatened or overfished. They just want to make more allotment available for Florida and for other states. They're trying to close our season early. And the state is actually, and they voted to do this at the Fin Fish Advisory Committee, actually talking about going out of compliance in state waters with the federal government, which actually I think is a good move. I mean, it's time we said these are state waters. The people of North Carolina control these waters, not the federal government. And, you know, there's all sorts of other issues, dredging the port, off-road vehicle rules at Cape Lookout, and sea turtle critical habitat, but those are some big ones.
Taylor Griffin stays with us for a few more minutes. Taylor, let's talk about two quick questions. Your solutions, and you said something to me off air. You're looking to cut the budget where you can?
We're going to have to cut the budget massively, Lockwood. Let's be frank about that. And it's going to affect things.
That's something that most politicians don't want to say.
Yeah, I know. You go to touch the third rail of politics. Look, here's the reality. Me and your millennial panel last night,
right.
We are not going to be able to retire at 67 if Social Security and Medicare are going to be solvent for us in the future, because it will run out of money.
Wait a second, you got Obamacare.
Yeah.
Okay, continue on. I'm being facetious.
Yeah. but and this is a big difference between me and Congressman Jones, because I know Congressman Jones was on the show last night, and he was with Jim Jordan, a guy who I admire a lot, a great conservative, and Walter was talking about the problems of the deficit. We agree on that. They're huge problems, but you have to do something about it. You have to make these hard decisions, and Jim Jordan's really been a leader on that. He's the Republican Study Committee budgets. Every year they try to substitute a conservative budget for the leadership-approved budget that goes through the House of Representatives, and every year conservatives band together and try to vote for it, and every year it doesn't get through. But every conservative votes for it, except for Walter Jones every year. The Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, a big project of Jim Jordan, who was on your show last night. Walter Jones voted against that. The proposal in 2013 to limit food stamps and to try to contain the growth. That program's gone from $35 to $80 billion.
Right.
Walter Jones voted against that.
Why?
I would vote for all of those things, first of all.
Why was Jim Jordan supporting Congressman Jones?
Well, I think Walter Jones has been opposed to the Republican leadership. I got no problem with that.
Okay.
I was glad to see a change in the leadership. But
what about that? What's your opinion of Paul Ryan?
Paul Ryan, look,
and then, by the way, we recognize that you have had Washington experience, but you're not there in the halls with the other congressmen. But there's been a lot of criticism. What's your opinion?
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't been there many years, but look, Paul Ryan is a decent guy. I've said that he was the most conservative alternative that was available to us to succeed John Boehner, that could bring Republicans together and take the fight to the Democrats and progressives. I think Paul Ryan still has to prove that point to people. I think he's a well-intentioned guy, and as I look at who to vote for Speaker, I'm going to be voting for the person who will support the smaller government and fiscal responsibility that I'm running on and that I'm promising people I'll represent.
Okay, you say cut budget, so you would look at anything that's not clearly identified as a responsibility of the federal government. Let's talk about Social Security and health care, Medicare. How do we address that? Because that is that's the growing boil, if you will.
Well, the reality is people pay into these programs, and they expect to be able to have those benefits when they retire. But the programs do not take in enough to provide the benefits that are promised, and we are going to have to fix that. We're going to have to reform those programs. 86% of the growth in spending over the next 20 years is going to be in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the debt, the mandatory spending programs. Okay. And those are the programs that are going to be difficult to deal with and are going to require some tough choices, and we have to make them.
Let's talk about the national campaign. Of course, I mentioned Indiana at the opening of the program this afternoon. Indications are that it's going to be a very close race, if not a victory for Donald Trump. What impact does the presidential race have on the Republican agenda across the country, because he's not perceived as a member of the establishment? Neither candidate is, for that matter. And the second question is, what impact can it have on your campaign and your platform?
Well, I think the same thing that has fueled the dynamic in this primary process is the same thing that's fueling my campaign, that people are fed up. People are ready for a new approach to this. Look, guys, you've tried this for years. You screwed it up. And now we need to bring new people in. We need to bring a fresh approach. And that's what's fueling our campaign. That's what's fueling the presidential race.
What is the reaction to your experiences with voters? How are they responding to your comments?
Very well. Very well. I mean, look.
Are they coming to you angry?
Yes, people are very angry, and rightly so. They elected Republicans to the House. They were elected Republicans to the Senate. They expected Obamacare to be repealed. They expected government to be reined in. Neither of those things have happened.
Are you seeking a repeal of Obamacare?
Yes. And I think we need to go to a free market-oriented solution that puts insurance in the hands of the individual consumer.
Okay. A caller called in earlier. Let's talk about this. What groups are supporting you? I know that you've had some major organizations express interest in supporting you. Are you getting those organizations?
Yeah. I mean, well, one of the things that I'm most grateful for, and by the way, I'll add, as soon as I leave here, I'm on my way down to Cape Carteret to Rib Eyes for the Crystal Coast Tea Party meeting. That'll be at 6:30.
That's a regular meeting.
The regular meeting
Tuesday,
tonight. Tuesday night, regular meeting at 6:30 at Rib Eyes in Cape Carteret. Please come out if you're listening. I'd love to meet you. But that group endorsed me last time. That meant a lot because those are smart grassroots conservatives who are actively working for their community and for community values. And there are a lot of other people as well. The community banks in Eastern North Carolina just came from Sound Bank. They're under the North Carolina Bankers Association, an organization that Senator Helms led before he was senator, by the way. For the first time in their 120-year history, they endorsed a challenger, and that was me, because I believe that we need to make sure that Dodd-Frank, which was intended to punish Wall Street, does not punish our community banks.
Smaller businesses.
And there's 6 community banks based in Eastern North Carolina. People don't know that. One of them right here in Moorhead, Sound Bank.
Taylor Griffin, our guest. And Taylor, as we wrap it up, the issue of the establishment versus the grassroots. Is this, if you will, an epiphanal or are we tipping the scales with this election?
I think that the voters are speaking extremely clearly. I don't think they could speak any more clearly. And frankly, I think it's the right thing because career politics is corrupting our country. People who go to Washington as a job are more interested in keeping that job and keeping their career going than they are in doing the work of the people. Look, this is supposed to be like jury duty. You're supposed to go there, do it a few years, and come home. The founders never imagined that people would do it as a career.
Is that your plan?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Do you have a time limit?
Yeah, I've said I've signed a pledge for 4 terms, but I'd probably look at more like 3. I've signed also a pledge to support a constitutional amendment to limit terms to 3 terms for the House and 2 terms for the Senate, and I think that's the right thing to do. In the meantime, let's impose it to the polls June 7th.
And again, June 7th, and that's important. We do have the election season is not over in North Carolina. To your point, no. June 7th. We have a responsibility to show up at the polls.
35 days from now. And if I can give our website, Lockwood, if you'd like to learn more, taylorgriffin.org is the website address, or you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, at tgriffinnc. I respond to every email and every phone call. Get in touch. I'm happy to talk to you. I'll talk to you personally.
Taylor Griffin, our guest this afternoon. You're listening to Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107 AM 1240.